This meeting to order, and before we get started, of course, I'm going to read the notice. This board meeting is being live streamed for the convenience of the public at www.okaloosaschools.com. The public may participate in the public comment and/or public hearing portions of the meeting by either personal attendance or by calling the school board meeting public participation phone line. A separate seating area has been set aside for the press and public who are in attendance at the meeting in accordance with social distancing guidelines as provided by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. If calling into the meeting, you should call 850-833-3100. The phone lines will be operational beginning at 6 p.m. on the night of the board meeting, and callers will be transferred into the board meeting during the public comment portion and/or public hearing portion of the meeting only, in the order in which calls are received. If you are calling into the meeting to make public comment, please be patient as there may be a wait time while being transferred into the meeting. And in accordance with the governor's directive in conducting public meetings, the Honorable Dewey Destin and the Honorable Tim Bryant and the Honorable Marcus Chambers are in attendance at the meeting, and the Honorable Linda Ivanchek, the Honorable Dr. Diane Kelly, and the Honorable Dr. Lamar White are participating by phone. So now we'll move down to approval of agenda. So I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. I need a second, please.
I'll second.
Second by Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. No recognition, no visitors, no administrative personnel appointments, and we are down to public comment 6.1. Members of the public desiring to address the school board, Form MIS 5241, public input and/or discussion of agenda items. Is there anybody here to speak before the public or before us? Yes, sir. Okay, and we have nobody calling in, so we will move down to item 7, which was workshop only, committee and staff reports. And now we're down to consent agenda, section 8. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Destin makes a motion to approve. I need a second, please.
I'll second.
Se-
Diane Kelly.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. A second by Dr. Kelly. Any discussion, any changes? Hearing none. Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion carries 5-0. So we'll move down to section 9. And this is human resource recommendations, and Dr. Hale is in attendance. So 9.1 is information only. 9.2 is information only. So 9.3, employment separations. I need a motion to approve.
I move.
Ms. Ivanchek makes the motion. I need a second, please.
I'll second.
Second, Dr. Kelly. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion carries 5-0. 9.4 is personnel recommendations. I need a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Diane Kelly.
Dr. Kelly makes a motion
I'll
to.
second it.
Second, Ms. Ivanchek. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion carries 5-0. 9.5, employee transfers. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Destin makes the motion. I need a second, please.
I'll second it, Evancheck.
Thank you, Ms. Ivanchek. A motion by Mr. Destin, second by Ms. Ivanchek. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion carries 5-0. 9.6, employee reinstatement. I need a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, so Dr. Kelly,
I'll second.
okay, thank you, Dr. White. Motion by Dr. Kelly, second by Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion carries 5-0. 9.7, reinstatement reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination. I need a motion to approve.
I'll move we approve that one, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Destin makes the motion to approve. I need a second, please.
I'll second it, Evancheck.
Okay, Ms. Ivanchek, I heard you. So a motion by Mr. Destin, second by Ms. Ivanchek. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion carries 5-0. We have nothing under discussion agenda, and we are now at construction program owners representatives business and Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Chairman. I've asked Jan to make available to you the agenda from this morning's meeting. And we are either proceeding well or finished on a number of these. Niceville High School Task Order Number 1. District-wide security upgrades, we're making very good progress on that. The Florosa Elementary parent pickup relocation, that one is basically done. Baker School renovation, that one is still underway and is proceeding. The Joe Etheridge Stadium, we've had that completed to the point where it can be used for any public gathering, and they are looking at some basically what I would call cosmetic fixes now that will help secure it for the future. For our middle school kitchen renovation, that one at the moment is kind of on a hold status until we find out how much money Baker's going to cost. The Longwood Elementary School quarter construction site and site fencing is proceeding, and a new roof over the Kenwood Elementary School kitchen and dining replacement is proceeding, and we didn't have anything under new business. We did have some brief discussions on Meigs Middle School. As you know, the fences have changed some of the parking over there, and having been a principal there and having good insight into what's there and what needs to be done, I'm sure Dr. White will put his 2 cents in so the folks can have the benefit of his experience and knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. And with Mr. Destin's comments, I'll start with Dr. White. Do you have anything you'd like to add to Mr. Destin's comments or ask a question of him?
No, sir. I think I'm pretty well familiar with it, and certainly, we have to do what we can with the resources that we have at this time, and perhaps if we're very fortunate and the voters support the initiative being led by the folks in the community, we might be able to do more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. White. Dr. Kelly, any comments or questions for Mr. Destin?
No, I think I'm caught up. Thank you so much, Mr. Destin.
Thank you.
And Ms. Ivanchek?
No question. I just want to say, Mr. Destin, you and your group are doing a fantastic job and really have been able to stretch the dollar and get a lot of things done. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so we'll move on down. We have a couple of items we're going to have to vote on. So 11.2 is authorization for professional service agreement from Faithful and Gould for price validation for program number 6, task order number 8, Kenwood Elementary School kitchen dining roof replacement. So I need a motion to approve this.
I'll move that we approve that, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. I need a second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Ivanchek. Motion by Mr. Destin, second by Ms. Ivanchek. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. 11.3, TPM program number 6, task order number 2, scope modification, Longwood Elementary School, single point of entry and security. I need a motion to approve.
I'll move we approve, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. I need a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. White. A motion by Mr. Destin, second by Dr. White. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Destin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Ivanchek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Dr. White, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. So we'll go past 12. There's nothing under information technology seat management. And we are now at Mr. McInnes's business.
No report tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. And we'll move on down to Mr. Chambers' business.
All right, thank you, sir. Just a couple items. First of all, we spoke briefly on Thursday, I believe, about the surveys that we've done, and just reiterating that we did do a parent survey as it pertains to how did this last 9 weeks go, as well as getting input from them for this upcoming school year. And then we also did the same thing on the teacher side, and that teacher survey closed on Sunday. As it pertains to the parent survey, we had approximately 5,000 plus individuals who took the survey, and Mr. Horton will give you more specifics on the teacher side, which we had a good showing as well. And of course, the goal is to get information that we can glean from the past 9 weeks, how we can be even better going forward, but then very specifically with the safety of our students and employees in mind, starting school next year. I think we've talked about every intention is to start school next year in August, but we need to make sure that we do provide for our families options. It's clear based on the survey that there's a percentage of families that want online instruction, and it's very responsible of us to make sure that we provide that for them. And like we've shared in board meetings and even one-on-one discussions I've had with some of you, we want to make sure that we do a good job for our students, but also keep the students here in Okaloosa County, because there's a lot that depends on that. So Mr. Horton has a lot more specifics on each of the surveys, and I want him to go through that, and then I'll have one more topic after that.
Okay. Mr. Horton, if you would,
Yes, sir.
please.
Thank you. And I'll be as brief as I need be, or answer any questions that are out there. So what we have here is some feedback from 2 groups right now, with more to come. So our parent survey, as Mr. Chambers said, over 5,000 responses, which is about a sixth of our population. And then following that will be some teacher responses as well. And then we're also in the process of putting out a survey for our ed support professionals and other employees in the district, so we get some input. The work group that's kind of taking a look at all the issues involved in going back to school in the fall did want to make sure we heard from all those groups. So just to kind of give you a brief run through here of the respondents, about half of them were elementary parents, and you've got all the specific data there. I think what we wanted to do first is kind of learn what we could from this spring. And so we asked the question, what was their opinion about the online learning that occurred at the end of the school year due to the COVID-19 pandemic? And I think the thing that I want to kind of at least highlight is it was new for everybody. There were a lot of moving parts, but I think the people who were involved, whether it be from the IT folks and the devices to the curriculum folks, I think overall the report card comes out as solid, and that is that 79% of our parents reported either no significant issues with the online learning, or they had a little bit at the beginning, just a new environment, but they managed to, after an adjustment period. So we note there, just the takeaway from there was about 20% of our families said they struggled throughout. And we didn't allow that, we allowed them to comment at the end of the survey. And so the struggle could be, there was no one there to supervise my kid because I had to work. There could have been technology issues, or we were trying to get hotspots out there. So any number of reasons, but 80% of the families felt like once it got up and going that it was very manageable. And so that's a piece that we want to take away from that and glean the things that we did well and places where we know we need to do better. The other piece that we were very interested in was the communication. So, the teachers did a great job reaching out. We had a help desk that was set up. And so we wanted to know if parents felt like the communication was appropriate during this last 9 weeks. And so what we learned was about 82%, a little over 8 in 10, felt like the level of communication was appropriate or more than necessary. And so again, that tells us that we feel like we did a good job in reaching out to parents, and we didn't segment that into teacher communication versus district level or principal level, just kind of an overall sense of communication. So while we think that's good, we know that we can do better and will do better going forward on that. So we were pleased to see that, but no, it's not the landing place. This is an interesting question here. We said if the decision is allowed to be made locally, which we believe it will be based on guidelines that we hope to get from Tallahassee, which would you prefer to happen next year for your child? So we asked 3 levels of questions. One would be begin the school year normally as possible with health and safety precautions in place. That was about 60% of our families said that. We had another 21% potentially interested in a blended piece where they might come to school for part of the week and then do some things online. And of course, at the high school level, we have a lot of that going on already with students maybe coming to school 4 or 5 periods and then either doing some online dual enrollment or some other pieces there. And then we had a little bit under 20% say strictly begin the school year online, similar to how we ended it this year. Now, we didn't get into the question here in the notification or the identification that the online learning in the fall in a full-scale model would be significantly different than it was this last 9 weeks. And I think, we know that, the teachers understand that, and it's our job to make sure that families who look at that option for the fall understand that as well. So that's an important piece.
So a quick question on online learning. So if my student decided to do online learning to begin with, and let's say 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they want to go back to school, what's going to be the outcome of that?
Yes, sir. And I think that'll come out of that work group, but it's very problematic because of the staffing and the scheduling that's involved to allow a family to begin a school year online and then have them, mid-September en masse come back to the school district, because we wouldn't be prepared from a scheduling standpoint and a staffing to make all that happen. So we've looked and talked with other districts and are contemplating some models where kids can do online. And their opinion and possibly ours is that if you make that choice to go online, then that's a commitment for a semester, because at semester we could redo some things and have the time to reschedule. Right. So that's something we would look at, but it would be challenging to have folks kind of coming into the district at all times in large numbers like that.
Mr. Horton, did you break down these percentages by high school, middle school, elementary at all?
Yes, sir. We actually, in this tool, I don't have those numbers right this minute, but we have the ability to filter this by respondent. So when we ask them to identify elementary, middle, or high, we can get all of these results for those levels as well. And I don't have it right here in front of me today, but I'll get those out to the board members.
It would be interesting to see who is leaning heavily toward. You would think just off the cuff that the smaller ones would be in the ones that are afraid to come back. And so much of this is going to be driven by the way parents and students perceive the safety precautions we're taking. And hopefully, we can take enough to where folks that are afraid and want to be online will decide they need to be back in traditional school. So we'll never get it to 100%, but we need to try to do as best we can.
Yes, sir, you're right. And I think Mr. Chambers is drafting some information right now to get information to parents on that. And he might speak to that. But you're exactly right. The other things that were kind of asked about were areas that we felt like there could be some difficulties. So we asked the parents a question about transportation, their thoughts on student transportation. And again, it's hard just to ask the question, will you ride the bus or not? So we had to give them a number of options, and it turns out that half of our respondents don't ride a bus anyway and would continue in that format. We had about 8% of our families say that they would only let their child ride a bus if their spacing was 6 feet apart per student. And so that would be a group that would say the social distancing piece of 6 feet is the prohibitive part of that. The majority of the folks who do ride buses agreed with the statement that they would let their child ride a bus if there were some, or understanding that current levels of social distancing were not able to be maintained. But again, Mr. Destin, to your point, that means they'll want to know the safety pieces. So will there be masks? Obviously, they'll be available. If parents want to send their kids with a mask, that's a given that can happen. So what kind of things will be in place on the buses? Obviously, hand sanitizer is already there. They were put in place there at the beginning of the year. The buses are cleaned after every route, sprayed down. So all those pieces are there. And you're right, at a certain point, a parent will be comfortable or not with what we're able to do to make those as safe as possible. We're looking at screenings for students getting on the bus, but then you run into the question at a bus stop with elementary students, if they happen to answer the wrong way, or if we had thermometers to scan and they've got a fever, then what do you do with a kid at a bus stop? You can't leave them there. So there are all sorts of questions, and it goes very deep in terms of the discussions and the best plan that works out that keeps kids safe in a way that we reasonably can do that. We asked a question about cafeteria. That's another place where there tend to be large gatherings, and we've had a lot of discussion about that. And again, these were just we could go 50 questions deep into a survey, but we just figured 7 or 8 questions is about where we wanted to land to get the feedback. This particular question asked about preferences on food service and school cafeteria. So to highlight it, the first response was, I would feel comfortable with my child eating in the cafeteria with safety precautions taken. So that could be some spacing in the best way that we can. It could be some partitions. Again, it could be optional masks and things for folks in the school. So that was about a little under 40%, I think. Then you had another group, third response down, that says, I would send my child with a meal from home to eat the fourth one, eat in the lunchroom. And that was another, I think, 22% and change. I'm having trouble seeing that. So combined, there was about 60+% that felt comfortable eating in the cafeteria. If I were a parent and I were given this option, I'd say, yeah, I'd like my kid to eat in the classroom, but there are layers to that, right? So with students eating in classrooms, it requires a lot more bodies to supervise kids, and we all know that all of our employees have lunch, and so I might think as a parent, well, if I just bring my kids in the classroom and I just sit there and have lunch with them, then it's all taken care of, and we've got a not so large of a gathering. But that teacher, has to have time to have lunch and not be in a supervisory role over students. So there are a lot of components of this, and they are not simple to always solve.
That must be new, Mr. Horton. My wife said she always had a supervisor kids.
Well, and I have a question regarding the school cafeteria, and with the governor's directive in phase 2, we are now 100% where restaurants can, be open for having people come in. Now, our cafeterias kind of function like I'm not going to say they're like a restaurant like Mr. Destin's, but they are, if you really think about it. And why would we fall under those guidelines for a cafeteria as far as what the state's doing with restaurants and all?
And I would say we'll look to the state for that, because the guidelines that have come out, there's nothing been set out yet specific to schools. And I expect we'll get some guidance there, like Georgia's received and some other states. And so I'd look to that. Again, as a parent, my answer would be, you can choose to go to a restaurant, but when you come to school, you're in the cafeteria. So not that we wouldn't follow guidelines that come out, but I'd like to see, if the state says you can have the cafeterias at 100% capacity, or probably didn't answer your question.
No,
but my brother runs a restaurant.
It
and so
wasn't
he's-
meant to be a trick question. I was
Yeah.
just, comparing, a retail restaurant, to a cafeteria. It kind of is the same thing, really, as far as the guidelines go. So, I mean,
And
and that's what I'm just trying to get at. What would that fall into,
Are we back to 100% at restaurants?
No, we're at 50% inside.
Yeah.
And I don't anticipate that changing real soon. So if we went by that standard, we could only serve half the kids at the time, and we're already starting lunch at some of the schools at 10:15. That would probably be a problem.
well, am I wrong? I thought restaurants were 100% now and retail was 100%.
Nope.
I think you can fill the outside at restaurants, outside
Okay.
eating.
Well,
Outside is.
okay. Excuse me?
Outside, I understand.
Outside, it just has a
Okay.
6-foot separation rule. Inside, still at 50%
Okay.
supposedly.
Thank you. Well, that was my fault. I thought it was 100% inside.
Oh,
so-
But
okay,
I-
right, though.
You threw me there. So that kind of is the feedback from the parents on it. And again, some of that, the individual comments, and you go through and read those, there's some insightful things. There's some parents who are nervous. There are some who are ready to get going and get back to school. So we know it's across the spectrum in terms of responses. But by and large, the parent survey results suggested that they are ready to come back to school. And so it's our job, I think, as Mr. Chambers said, to make sure that we provide the appropriate, safe environment that we can with the resources we have, and do what we can that's feasible to protect all of them.
And I would just add, before he goes to the teacher survey, so I am sending a letter home to parents now that the survey is done, and we'll share with them just a little bit of information, let them know that we have a work group that's looking at going back to school. We are looking at certain precautions, but then we also just pose some questions for them to consider as well in this letter. And what we will be doing is looking at a date in July, trying to get a little further into June right now, but a date in July where families would say, yes, I want to be online. And we are strongly looking at right now, especially based on some of our surrounding districts that are looking at some of the same thing, that once you decide that you would go online, you would be online for the semester. And just like we said a second ago, just the staffing piece to that, if we didn't have some type of a hard, fast rule, it could be very difficult.
Okay, so on to the teacher side. We had 1,100 plus teachers respond to this, which is a good number. Again, I think that's close to 50%, maybe a little more.
I think we have about a little over 1,800 teachers.
Yes, sir. So we asked them to identify the grade level they work with. So again, to your point, Mr. Destin, we'll be able to go back in and filter this by individual grade band to get those teachers' responses. And then we asked them to identify their primary subject area of focus. And of course, a self-contained elementary teacher might check 4 boxes in that case, but we think we got a good representation across all disciplines there. We also asked if the teacher was an exceptional student education teacher, and with respect to, I read all the comments, and it is true that we all teach exceptional student education students. We all do. Some folks are hired with their title as exceptional student education. They may teach a self-contained classroom, or they may be an ESC resource teacher, but a teacher corrected me and said we all are exceptional student education teachers, and that's true. But to that point, we know that there are challenges in ESC education and online learning, and so we'll be able to look at this piece and those teachers and what their responses were specific to the questions. Again, we asked the teachers the similar question where we could about their experience with online learning, and because we know there's the possibility that they'll struggle with it as well because it was new to most everyone. We got a response that 91% of the teachers, I think it was 82% or 80% in the previous, 91% of teachers said they had no significant issues or worked through them after an adjustment period and ended up the year feeling okay with where they were. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they, supported every single thing that was done, or some of our teachers, as you know, had to develop their own curriculum if they were elective teachers, and that's a challenge. But overall, I think those results speak to the fact that the teachers did not have issues with the online piece. Again, that's a testament to the curriculum folks and the MIS folks and everybody else who played a role. We asked this question as well. It was changed slightly. This was the question about what would you prefer to happen next fall. We had 77+% say begin the school year in schools with safety precautions taken, and about 22% of our teachers right now said they would prefer to begin the year online. So as I mentioned, and Mr. Chambers mentioned at Thursday's workshop, at least there's a somewhat of a match between the families who said they wanted to start the school year online and the teachers who suggested they were interested in starting the school year online. So now, if that's true, then our job will be this summer at our school level to determine how those matches can be formed and we can get the teachers and the students connected in the right ways. So that was important. If we had a big disconnect there, that would have been something where we'd have to kind of look. And I think once we get to the point that Mr. Chambers said in July where folks are making some final decisions, it'll actually maybe turn into a school at a time, contacting families and asking the questions and making sure we've heard from every single person about what their intent is for next fall. We did ask the teachers what supports would you most need if you were going to be teaching online in the fall. So the way to read this chart would be the green is their number one choice. So that means that 68% of the teachers said that curriculum for the online learning would be their number one choice. Only 17% said professional development in best practices in online learning would be their number one choice. And 14.95% said additional technology training for things like Zoom and Teams would be their number one choice. So it's clear for those that were looking at an online model that curriculum would be the most important thing, that it be available. We asked them a question about classrooms because that's another thing. The cleaning that's going on that happened toward the end of the third 9 weeks as we were moving into the COVID-19 period, and then what we anticipate will be happening next year as part of that plan to make parents feel comfortable on what's going on. We asked our teachers which of those describes your thoughts on the cleaning of manipulatives and devices in your classroom. And overwhelmingly teachers stepped up and said, at least in this survey, that they would be willing to do some cleaning of their manipulatives in their classrooms as long as they were provided with cleaning supplies. I think that's important. I think that it first off, it shows what our teachers are willing to do, and they've been doing all along with respect to their classrooms and helping their students. But I think there's a realization that when you look at the manipulatives that are in an elementary classroom and you look at the devices that are in a classroom and computers, the custodial staff right now would struggle to do all of the cleaning that's necessary in the school and pick up that extra piece. So that would be a part of the discussion of the work group is what do we do about manipulatives that the kids use at the elementary level? There's some great ideas out there about having bags and each kid has their own set and then those stay with that student and don't get transferred from student to student, and so there are additional costs to that. And so there's a lot of thinking going on there, but that was a piece that I just wanted to kind of determine what we already knew to be true, that's that teachers step up and do the things that need to be done to help kids learn. And so that was the end, and we did ask for some just comments from on the part of the teachers as well. So we have those as well. You received these 2 sets of PowerPoints. We'll work to get another one out this week for Ed Support and other employees across the district to kind of bring that all together.
Okay. So stay right there, Mr. Horton. So, Mr. Destin, any more comments or questions?
I was just wondering, have we done any breakdown on age so that, we know that the older the teachers are, the more likely they are to have a bad outcome? And is that playing into the choice about online versus in school, or what do we do with teachers who are over 60 who are afraid to come back? And do we even have very many of those?
Over 60, yes. Afraid to come back. I'm not sure where the number, but
they have anxiety over coming back.
yes, sir. So that absolutely has to be taken into account, and we have to review that information. And the hope would be that those teachers who are in those positions, that where we have need for online, we can connect that and make sure that happens, because I mean, I think we want to make sure, as long as our enrollment is there in one form or the other, that all of our teachers are going to be needed.
Yep, well, I can see it, at some point it may cause us a shortage if a percentage of them just decide they're not coming back. And I guess we've anticipated perhaps that outcome,
A percentage of teachers?
the older teachers, if they just make the choice that they're not gonna come back, then we'd have to hire some folks, which may cause us a bubble at the end
Could-
of trying to get our staff in place.
Could, and we're trying to analyze that right now. We have not, to my knowledge, have received a lot of notification from teachers at this point that they're not coming back
Yeah.
for that specific reason, but we have to keep watching that. The other thing I'll say, there was another question there that I didn't put in this presentation. We asked the teachers, if we were in an online environment, to what level would you be willing to teach online? Right? So that's different than what would you prefer happen, but to what level would you be willing to teach online? And I want to say 75 to 80% of the teachers said, yep, I'd be willing to do it if I needed to do it, as long as you provided me curriculum, or I'd do it in any circumstance. And so we'd have a pool of folks, if we're exhausted, that would be willing to teach online if we had to use more. So the teachers said they would do that.
And the ESE component, I'm sure online is much more of a task there. What has been our experience with those situations?
Well, and I could have the ESE department come back with some information on that. What I will say is I think any model going forward could probably, and again, in those situations, may be able to make use of a hybrid model where maybe some services could be provided to an ESE student at the school, and then other pieces being done online. But I think that our experience overall, and again, breaking this data apart, was pretty good as it relates to those services. But we know that face-to-face is always going to be, in almost every case, is going to be better.
And the only other thing I'd add on the ESE side is, you know, that a lot of our students receive services, and a lot of those services have been done via Zoom or via Teams meeting, and we can get more information. But what has been shared by Dr. Doxey is amazingly, especially like the speech and language services, have gone extremely well over the Zoom and in the team meeting. So I was pleased to hear that. And then going back to the 65 years of age or older, that's one of the things as well, just like with the parents, where we'll need to know in July. Our schools will also be going through that process even now and into the July timeframe. And I say that to say, because we know that things are changing. And so as more information comes out, you could have people who are more inclined to be comfortable, or the opposite. But Dr. Hale has already, he's already pulled data on those individuals in that age category, just because we needed to know at the very beginning when making sure that we were doing all the safety protocols in place, and who may not feel comfortable coming to work right now. So we have that data, but then that's a very good question, and that's something that we will continue to monitor, so we're not all of a sudden scrambling to hire teachers.
I was interested to see if there was an age correlation between the 20% that said they would like to continue to do online. Perhaps there would be, you would think.
There could be.
So, Ms. Ivanchek, any questions or comments for Mr. Horton regarding this item?
No, thank you, Mr. Horton. That was very detailed. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Kelly?
I do have a question related to, since you talked about the students that were online and the shift away from our traditional classroom model. For our approximately 32,000 students, what did we do for attendance collection, and was there any correlation to second semester grades and any attendance variation? I know we always do those calculations typically about this time of year, and just wondering how that was done for second semester this time.
I think our attendance normally runs in the low 90% for traditional school. And so as we collected attendance now, students were not required to log in every day under the guidelines here. And so what we did is we looked at students who were not working in the system and tracked our attendance that way. And so the attendance overall, because we had very few students at the end of the year not get in and do coursework, the attendance from that standpoint was high. I think as the grading procedures were sent out by the district that talked about how there was some compassion in grading this year, it probably doesn't equate on a year-to-year basis in terms of grades and attendance. But we track that based on students who did not attempt any work in their courses.
So it was at 90%, or it was above 90%?
Yes, ma'am. No, it was above 90%.
Attendance.
Yes, ma'am. At one point, the superintendent, I think, put out some information that 95 and 97% of our elementary and secondary students were engaged in the coursework. I think as we got into the 9 weeks, those numbers actually rose because there's some students who just, whether the supports weren't there at home or they just, in some cases, just kind of procrastinated. A lot of students then picked up and did some work once we got further into the 9 weeks and were able to kind of get through.
Anything?
Okay, I guess I have a second question then that kind of rings in my mind. The correlation between attendance and grades, and then the question would be, knowing that we did use compassionate grading, to use your term, so that we helped our students who were learning in a new environment away from our traditional classroom model. What is our plan for evaluating what I'll call an accurate assessment of a student's measure of learning, so that parents and teachers, when we start back, will have an accurate standing of a student's academics right when they begin? In other words, do we have a way to know if they actually have learning gaps or learning gains when they start in the fall?
So good question, Dr. Kelly. So first of all, when they do come back in the fall, one of the measures or assessments that we will use, just like we've done in the past, is we'll use the MAP. And MAP is a test that basically lets us know by standard where kids fall. And also, I say it's a good question for the simple fact that we know that regression can happen over the summer. It can happen over Christmas break. So what we have done is we've put a GAP program in place for ELA and math, where students will be able to go and work in ELA content and in math content to basically look at what did they miss the last 9 weeks. And then also each school in their school performance plan at the start of this upcoming year will also address how they're going to close that gap, so to speak, from the beginning of the year going forward into that first 9 weeks and on. So there's a plan in place to make sure that we look at the gap that students may have lost, and then as well as looking at the MAP, which is an assessment that we use so we can be more individualized in our instruction and help students accordingly.
Okay, so our parents will be informed of where their children stand academically in the near future or in the fall after the schools have started back and they implement their SPPs.
So if I'm understanding your question correctly about in the near future, of course grades just went out, but as it pertains to the start of the school year, when they take the MAP, those parents would be notified of their scores on the MAP from their child's teacher.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Dr. Kelly?
No, I think I'll hold for now. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Dr. White, any questions or comments for Mr. Horton?
Well, not really. I mean, I've mentioned at the workshop that I certainly was happy with the fact that we had asked our customers what they thought, the parents, what they thought about the experience at the end of the year as we were all kind of thrust into the midst of all this. I would say that it's very gratifying to me that according to the parents and also according to our teachers, that given everything that every school district had to deal with, that they were actually successful with the immediacy of an online experience that really we had to just jump in there and get with the program, so to speak. And I'm sure that everyone's aware of that in some states like Georgia and Texas and other states, they actually had such a negative experience with online instruction that those school districts went ahead and just ended their academic year early after they concluded that it was too cumbersome for teachers, students, and parents. And there's an excellent article in the Wall Street Journal in April regarding that. And that certainly wasn't the case in Okaloosa County. And so I would just commend the superintendent, his staff, and all the teachers and the parents too for making lemonade out of lemons, so to speak. So thank you, Mr. Bryant. That's all I have.
You're welcome, Dr. White. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chambers.
All right, and then just the last thing I wanted to notify the board of, which we've previously shared, is, as you know, we created an online registration model. So parents who at the time weren't able to come to school, or parents who might be uncomfortable to come to school, as we go forward would have an ability to register their students online. And of course, we all know how important registration is and having accurate numbers. So I just wanted Mr. Horton to kind of share with us where we are, how many students have registered online to date, and how that's going.
Yes, sir. Not to confuse it with registering for online learning. It's an online platform to register for school. And so 1,065 students have been registered in that way. And as we mentioned, there's a follow-up piece and some documentation that have to be completed at schools. But of that 1,065, 564 were kindergartners, new kindergartners. Tracking all of that with admitted numbers of students last year, because we've got to look at it compared to where we were last year, and also, and more importantly, to our projections for what we projected back in December for the next school year, because that's what our funding is based upon, is our projections. So we'll continue to track those. I think year to date, from in kindergarten enrollment standpoint, I think we're down a couple hundred students on a kindergarten class of hopefully 2,400. But I think we're beginning to catch up. And so now, as our school buildings begin to open up again under the first phase here, that we'll track those numbers. And I do it about every other day to kind of see where we are relative to projections. And again, when it comes down to it, we have to provide teachers for the students who are here, no more, no less. And so that's the important part, is to make sure we're tracking it and monitoring the hiring pieces that are done to make sure that we do this responsibly.
Let me parse out the numbers a little bit.
Yep.
I think you told us 1,065 that have registered. Of that
Online.
percentage, how many are elementary or pre-K?
A little over half are kindergarten. That's the 1 through 12 piece. While we maybe have not gotten all the registrations that we have, we probably also haven't seen some of the withdrawals that occur as students move to another district. So there's not a lot of growth in those other grade levels from year to year, unless there's a bubble working through. So it's really that kindergarten number we want to kind of keep an eye on.
Yep.
So we're at 836 right now for kindergartners admitted to our school district. Last year at the end of May, which was about a week ago, we were at 908. So 908 last May 30th, and we're at 836 today. But it's about a week ahead of time. So we'll watch that and see if we get closer and closer to where we were last year in our projections, and sound the alarm if we're not.
Well, that's about a 15% deficit or so
From
from last year.
about, I'd say about.
Okay, which is kind of what the historical projections the last time we dealt with the pandemic were. And if that is what runs forward, then that's a substantial amount. So let's hope that it gets better.
And we're watching it every day.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Destin, you were talking about the last, are you talking about the
1917, yeah.
19?
Yeah, that was 15 to 20% of the kids didn't
Right.
come to school for a couple of years. They were just didn't come. So
And I know I appreciated
Well-
your comment on that, because now we have the technology.
that's right, and that should make that number less.
Right.
It should make it significantly less. So let's hope that it does.
Okay.
One of the things, too, that just has happened this afternoon, we've got Okaloosa Online, which is our own franchise in the county. Interestingly enough, as enrollment, as students across the state look for online options, some districts are not equipped to handle all of those. And so we've actually been reached out to this afternoon about the possibility of having students who don't live in Okaloosa County enrolling in Okaloosa Online, which is an interesting concept, and I would say a good concept, to be able to provide educational services for those kids, and then ultimately collect FTE for them if they're enrolled in our school.
That would be a very positive thing, wouldn't it?
So we're going to track that, and we've indicated we're interested in that. So we'll see what develops over the summer.
That would certainly make up any deficit and might go positive on the FTEs. Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Mr.
No,
Duffy?
that's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Vancheck, any questions or comments regarding Mr. Horton's presentation here?
No, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Kelly?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Dr. White?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chambers, anything else?
All right, and the last thing, as you know, graduation is a big topic. So we did put out to our parents more specific dates for the week of July 14th through the 18th. And one thing I do want the board to know is there's two sets of dates. There's a date that if guidelines were to loosen and we can have a graduation like we've always had it, with some social distancing as well. So we would definitely do that. I think all of us would love to see that happen. I know I would. But then there's also the dates in the smaller increments of numbers. So, for example, there might be 75 in a group. There might be X number of parents or visitors that will be able to come, and we have multiple sessions. So you'll see the dates for each of the schools, one overall date, and then sessions of graduations as well. So that's gone out, and families can now plan more accordingly than just the week of July 14th through the 18th. They know the specific dates.
If I may, Superintendent, the outside in the stadium's traditional, that also is going to be accompanied by social distancing, or no?
It would, if so. For example, let's just say that first of all, if we were able to have a graduation the way that we always have had, things would have changed in CDC guidelines and where we are. But what we do know is even on the football field, because Mr. Horton's done a little bit of the math on that, even on the football field, we can space our kids out more accordingly. Where we would not be able to be as efficient if we had a bigger graduation as normal would be in the stands. But that's why also we have that option that we would go to if we could, but we're very prepared to do, like Choctaw may have 4 different sessions of graduations to get all of their kids done.
Well, I noticed if we had to do it the other way with the smaller sessions, probably from a standpoint of trying to not spread, it would be worse. So if we can be outside, all the studies I've read about restaurants and other gatherings, if they are outside, the transmission of the virus goes down dramatically. And to put them inside, even in cohorts, where one cohort comes after the next, the virus stays in the air, airborne for hours. So if we can, we want to be outside. And, I urge you to try to figure that out.
No, I understand, and we'll definitely look at that and just and also keep it in mind, of course, all of everything that we've done. We've also we run that through our local health department to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I definitely hear you.
Outside's healthier. That's what they say with our restaurant business, is if you're outside, they feel much better about it.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Chambers?
That is it.
All right. So we'll go down to board members' announcements and requests for information, and I will start with Ms. Vancheck tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to give some information from the Public Schools Foundation on our Take Stock in Children. As you know, we just had graduation, and just to let everybody know that we did graduate 14 Okaloosa students who were in the Take Stock in Children program. Now, of that, we actually had one student who was received an academy appointment, West Point Academy, and also a student who is going to Princeton. So out of those 14, we have those two. The other 12 will all be attending state, community, or state colleges. So we're very proud of that because, the Take Stock in Children program goes along with the Bright Futures and so forth. So we're real excited and looking forward to next year. We currently will have 55 students in this program. And thanks to the efforts of the director, Nicole Snyder, and the others, all of those 55 students have a mentor. And the mentoring piece is a big part of this program because a student is assigned a mentor when they come in the ninth grade, and that mentor stays with them. And I know we have many people in the district who are mentors. And the other thing I wanted to point out about the program is we want to recognize Ms. Susan Campbell. She's been the college success coach for this program for the last 5 years, but she will be retiring this month. So the Public School Foundation commends her on her work and dedication to these students and wishes her well in her retirement. So that's our report from the foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vanchek. Dr. White.
No, Mr. Ryan, not tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Destin.
Nothing tonight, Chairman.
Okay. And Dr. Kelly.
I'll just reiterate again, we so appreciate those who are contributing to the school district with their school donations, such as this month we have Howell and Swanek donating to Ruckle's basketball team. And a reminder again to participate in the Lip Sync for Hope that benefits our Hope squads in the school district. And you can go to www.bringhope.now for the rules and categories that you might wish to apply for. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. And we'll move down to 16, public comment. So this is 16.1, members of the public desiring to address the school board. And we'll give it about a 30-second. Are we good? Okay, thank you. And so we'll go around real quick. Ms. Scallon, Mr. Horton, anything else? And Dr. Hell, anything? Okay, this meeting's adjourned.